For those of you who don't know me, my name's Matt Longman from Ramsack, and I'm very pleased to welcome you along to our webinar today, where we're going to dig into how to get the most out of SharePoint. So I'm sure many of you out there are already using SharePoint in some form. For some of you, it's become an invaluable tool, a central place where documents live, teams collaborate, and information is shared seamlessly. But for others, I know it can feel a bit overwhelming or even leave people longing for a return to file servers, which is something that we hear from our clients from time to time. And we often hear that they understand there's lots of potential in SharePoint, but it doesn't always feel intuitive. Sometimes that could be the way that SharePoint has been set up, and maybe just doesn't quite fit the way that your teams want it to work today, and or how you maximize the potential of the tool. Some of the most common challenges that we hear at Ramsack from our clients are things like people struggling to find the right document at the right time, how they attach it to emails, knowing where they should save their files. You get confusion between SharePoint and Teams. And then, of course, there's security concerns. How do you access or share your data safely, both internally and externally? So that's really why we've put on today's webinar, and we've partnered with our friends at Information EXP, who specialise in helping organisations cut through the complexity and get SharePoint working in a way that's logical, user-friendly, and actually makes your day-to-day working smoother. So Information EXP is a partner that Ramsack have been working with for several years, and I'm delighted to introduce the two gentlemen that you can see appearing on your screen and on the slide in front of you today, Rupert Squires and Ben Leach, who'll be sharing their expertise and leading the webinar today. Over the next 40 minutes or so, Rupert and Ben are going to be walking you through some practical tips and real examples of how you can structure SharePoint effectively, showing some demos of good design and ways to collaborate. And then we'll also keep some time at the end for questions and answers. So do feel free to post some questions as we go along. Hopefully you'll all see at the top of your screen a Q&A button that you can use to post questions as we go through the webinar. If you can try and use that rather than the chat button, it makes it easier for us to keep an eye on those, and we'll answer them at the end. So whether you're here as an existing SharePoint user and you're frustrated about how it currently works for you, or want to understand some better ways of using it and unlock more of that potential, hopefully we'll have some informative and useful tips for you, and you're in the right place. Rupert, over to you.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for the lovely introduction there. So maybe just worth covering my role, Ben's role. So my role as client director, I get to speak to a lot of organizations, and they're telling me, right, this is what we're up against. Can you help us? What's the way forward? And so I'm really hearing lots of those struggles, and that's what we want to try and address today. I'm joined with my business partner, Ben. Ben Leach has been working with SharePoint for 15, 20 years. So he's pretty much seen most things, whether it's around intranets, whether it's filing, policy management, knowledge management, all those kind of things. So today, we're going to start with a couple of slides just to set the scene, but really, as Matt said earlier, it's all about sort of the demo and showing a bit of best practice and give you some ideas of maybe what that could look like for you. So I think, Ben, what we're going to do is just start with what the goals are, what we're trying to achieve here, and what that enables. So I've got 4 things which I really want to cover here, Ben. And the first one is information confidence. So maybe if you could just explain and introduce yourself a little bit and say what our first goal is.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Rupert. As Rupert says, so I've been working with SharePoint for quite a long time, and I help organizations kind of address some of these challenges and how they can get some real structure and improve some of the problems that they're having moving forward. But as Rupert says, I think this first point is around information confidence. So as Rupert says, what does that mean? Really, it means knowing where to put stuff. Where am I saving stuff? Where am I finding stuff? There should only be one place where this stuff goes, so I know I can put it there consistently. There's a single version of the truth, and what I'm looking at is accurate and definitive, and not having some of these confusions about trying to find the right thing, or someone saved it in lots of different locations.
So you spend more energy actually working on your content rather than just trying to find where to put it or where to find it. So that's number 1, Ben. Number 2, data control.
Yeah, absolutely. So people want to feel confident that when they are putting something in the right place, that only the people that should be allowed to access it are able to access it, or the people that need to get hold of it are able to get hold of it. So making sure that your permission structure is correct and simple is fairly critical. The next part is ensuring that we are meeting our compliance obligations. So again, who has got access to this data? Can we audit that? But also, can we ensure that we're keeping documents as long as we are obliged to keep them, and then disposing of them, so we're not being left with this, shall we say, potential legacy of content that might cause us some issues further down the line.
So really about that data being both an asset and a liability. For example, I guess if you have CVs for a job role, you want to make sure that when that role's closed out, maybe the people who weren't successful, you remove those CVs, that personal information, maybe after a period of time. So security, and I think, is one of the things where people can get in a real pickle with the level of granular security available in SharePoint, and basically what rules we put in place to try and make that easy. Work efficiency, Ben. Let's dive into this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think this really just pulls it back to what we were saying before around the sort of confidence. So if you know that things are being saved in the right place, and you know that you can find things easily, it means that you're going to be more efficient to achieve a particular task, because it's going to take you less time to do it. You're not going to be wasting time figuring out where to put something, and you're not going to be wasting time trying to find something, starting to work on it, and then realizing it was the wrong version of the document, and actually it's moved on since then. So this point about work efficiency is really about being comfortable that I'm working on the right thing, and also using some of the tools that are there to be able to search for documents and filter and get to the right thing as quick as possible.
Yeah, I mean, how many times have we redone something we've already done because we couldn't find it? And I think the other thing is, particularly where people's working hours become a bit grayer, it's like, well, actually, there's no one to ask. I need to be confident I can find the right information. Maybe it's in an evening or a weekend or something like that. And being able to work confidently. And then final point, Ben, obviously we've talked about what we achieved today, but this is more about what you might want to achieve tomorrow in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you can't really avoid AI is here, AI is now, and we need to be ready for it so that we can make the most. So the way that we really position this is by doing all of these things, it's going to put these good foundations in place, so you can then build on some of the technologies that are becoming more and more prevalent. So organizing your data in such a way that you can get real insight from it using AI, and not have your AI results polluted with the kind of incorrect or irrelevant content. Also being able to build on and do things like automating processes. If you've got the right foundations, then you can start build on and streamlining some of those, perhaps more clunky processes that you already have. And then, of course, as your organization grows, you want to feel comfortable that the volume of data that you are going to start putting into your SharePoint environment is going to scale and not cause you a problem or come to a grinding halt as you get too big.
Yeah, I think, there's things like automation, but whether it's creating documents, issuing tasks automatically when a project starts, can really help remove some of that sort of repetitive grunt work. So those are the goals and sort of a summary here slide. But to get to the goals, Ben, I know you have a few questions you like to ask to help people understand, well, is this for me? Have I actually got a problem here? And is actually, as part of maybe your health check. So I think let's run through those, and then we'll head into the demo. So
yeah, good
number
stuff.
one, then, struggling to find information. Tell me what's causing this, and what's the impact actually?
Yeah, I think it's, we're going to look at a few sort of key symptoms that might indicate whether or not you might have a SharePoint issue or not. And yeah, the first one very much, are you struggling to find information consistently? Do you find it difficult? Do you think that search isn't very effective? Is it taking time? And the general causes of this kind of problem, if you are experiencing it, are that there is not necessarily a clear structure within your SharePoint estate. Maybe there are inconsistent practices with regards to filing. You might have seen those documents that are marked as _final or _final comments, final. Those types of scenarios that we've all kind of seen in file naming. And we're not necessarily benefiting from the use of metadata to make things easier to find at a later date.
Got you. Okay. I think this is something you can certainly see in certain offices, is shoulder surfing, should we say, where you see a whole load of files saved on desktops. Why are people doing that, Ben? There's got to be a better place, right?
Yeah, so they're generally doing it because they don't feel confident that where they're going to put it in SharePoint is either safe in terms of who else has got access to it. Maybe they haven't had enough training to feel confident that they can put it in the right place. And so, yeah, it comes back to this point about being confident in terms of where you're going to save your data and making sure that the right people have got access to it. So in those scenarios, people revert back to their default, which is put it somewhere at least they know that they've got it and no one else does.
Perfect. Okay. And then I think this big impact from particularly COVID, where a lot of people moved to SharePoint in a rush because they needed remote access, that you can end up with a lot of files in one document library. And maybe it's just worth saying what a document library is, Ben, just to bring that to life.
Yes, I mean, I probably won't go into too much detail right now about that, but in short, if you're putting documents into SharePoint, then you're putting them inside a document library. So it's one of the core standard containers that are available to organize your data. But what we have seen historically is that people bring their kind of file share mindset approach to SharePoint and assume that it's just a file share in the cloud when it isn't. It's quite different and has other considerations. So what we see is that standard structure, we've got a single document library. I have seen scenarios with 2 million files in a single document library with lots of different folders, permissions managed through AD, basically treated like a file share. And we end up with all sorts of performance issues with that. We have issues with things like syncing via OneDrive, and we have the issue that we can't benefit from the use of metadata because we're not recognizing that there are different use cases and different libraries might have different sort of configurations.
And we're going to see more of that later, I know. Now, SharePoint is built with sites, but when I move between those sites, and everything feels different, Ben, because I think everyone's gone a little bit creative, shall we say. So what's the cause of this and what's the impact?
Yes, I mean, okay, so look, I think the first thing here is, okay, at least people are using sites. That's great. So they're starting to move to sites. But what we do tend to see is this comes about perhaps where there has been a slightly organic approach to governance, or shall I say no governance, where effectively people have just created sites. We have different pockets of people that have tried things in their own way. Maybe there's a few people that are quite curious and like to tinker, but everyone's come up with their own approach. So as I move from one place to another, I've almost got to relearn the behavior of that site versus this, which makes it harder for me to navigate my way around and feel, that I'm getting a consistent experience.
Got you. So it's governance and okay, so that's a key piece. And then with Teams, just particularly Teams, actually, it became very easy to create brand new sites and working spaces. But I go into those sites and there's nothing in there.
Yeah, so I think this is an extension of the previous point, really, which is that Teams in particular has become very organic. Anyone will be able to create a team. There will be teams with duplicate names. Maybe one person created it and then someone else did a similar one. And so they stopped using the previous one, but they didn't shut it down. And of course, unfortunately, what happens is that we look at our Teams interface and it's cluttered and noisy. We see lots of teams. They're not ordered alphabetically because of the way that Teams kind of organizes your relevant ones. And it's just confusing. You're added into teams without realizing, and they've got lots of conflicting purposes, which just, creates a lot of noise and just makes us less efficient at what we're doing.
I think, the key word I took out of that was purpose, making sure that teams have purpose. And I think we're going to cover that too. And then the final point, Ben, is probably a bit more downstream. So people who've been using SharePoint for a while, or maybe you have decommissioned file servers, and now we're suddenly finding that, I seem to be running out of storage. I'm nervous I'm going to start getting bills from Microsoft for my overage. Can we do anything about this, or is what it is?
No, absolutely. There are things that we can do about this, and it does seem to be a problem that we're having more and more conversations with our clients about. And in particular, it's something that you see for maybe those slightly smaller organizations that have a lot of knowledge workers. So, maybe 100 people, but they're very, very information heavy. So you don't get a lot of, initial storage. anyway, but you've got lots and lots of documents. So yeah, absolutely. How you manage your versions, how you're thinking about, dealing with your historical drafts and your published records, and how you're ensuring that data is being disposed of after a period of time when you don't need it. Absolutely.
Okay, so look, that's enough slides. I think let's go to the demo, Ben. Maybe you could just take us around, give us a picture of what good looks like, how it's been structured in that way, and why we've made the decisions to do what we've done. And obviously, SharePoint's a flexible platform, so every client has their own specific needs, but hopefully this gives you a direction of travel of some practices and principles that we put in place.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Just come back to my screen here. There we go.
Perfect. So I think as we do this, we may just introduce a couple of concepts that people may be familiar with already, but we'll just sort of very briefly sort of cover them. So I think the first thing that we're looking at is effectively our SharePoint homepage. This would be your entry point to all of your SharePoint estate. It's the page that you would typically set as your default homepage for all of your users. And realistically, what we're looking at is an intranet. Okay, so an intranet being a place where we're publishing information for all of our staff. We've got news being published. We've got things like policies, the definitive resources, the definitive content that people know how to go and get. If we were to click into a news story, for example, perhaps the new employee benefits, we can publish and organize nice looking pages that we can then go and push out to our staff. Maybe you jump back to the homepage a minute, please, Rupert, if you don't mind. The other key thing on the homepage is our links. So when people sometimes ask me, well, what kind of thing should I put in here? I say, well, any of those tools that you use elsewhere in your organization, no one should have to remember them or bookmark them to be able to get to them. They should be front and center on your intranet homepage so everyone knows how to access them easily. They don't need to, you don't need to fit everything on the page. You can target them to different groups of users. So if you've got a sales team, you can target the sales links to them. You can target the projects links to your projects team, all based on different audiences of users, so that you then see the things that are relevant to you.
Okay, so different people are going to get a different set of links in my resources if you choose to go down that targeting route.
Yeah, absolutely. This will be personalized. So to introduce a term that some of you may have heard of already, so we have grouped all of our intranet sites into a single intranet hub. As Rupert is highlighting in the navigation there, we have an About Us, we have a People section for publishing, benefits, pension information. We have an IT section where you're publishing useful information about what to, raising tickets, etc., and maybe things about your premises. So that standard information that everyone should have access to is wrapped together into a single intranet hub. So the key thing that a hub gives you is a consistent navigation experience wherever you are. So as you navigate around, that navigation will be there, and a search scope that only returns the published resources and not all of the other noise in the rest of your SharePoint estate. So perhaps, Rupert, if we just do a search, we're going to search for some benefits information. Okay, so what we can see here is that we're getting results that have been filtered by sites that are in the intranet hub. I'm not seeing things where benefits might appear perhaps in the context of a project or something else. I'm not having lots and lots of results come through. It means that my search results are much more relevant about the context of what I'm doing. So why don't we click into that employee benefits page a minute?
Yeah.
Well, the one below, I think we have to. Oh, sure. It's fine. It's fine.
Oh, actually, we've seen this one, haven't we? Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's fine. So as we said, we're looking at our employee benefits page. That's great. I think the last thing we're going to do before we wrap up the intranet is just explore policies a little bit more. So one of the things that we recommend is bringing all of your policies and procedures into a central place instead of having them organized by and stored in different department spaces, because actually that means your users can go about finding them a lot easier. If you click on the HR policies link there, Rupert, what we will see is that we've effectively stored everything in one place, but created some different predefined search filters. So we have got all of our human resources policies, and we can see from that little tag highlighted on the left-hand side that we are filtering all of our policies where the department has been set to human resources, but we can also filter by document type or keywords or any other parameters.
Actually, and that's an interesting point, Ben, because if I'm looking for an expense policy, would I go to the finance site? Would I go to the HR site? Actually, that doesn't matter anymore because I only go to one place and I'm going to get my result first time.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, in my experience, often finance don't tend to have a space on the intranet because they're not that focused on creating content. They might have a couple of policies in the expenses link, but that might sit within a people heading in the intranet so exactly that reason. So you're not having to get people worry about which site to go to. We're bringing everything into a central place like that. So there's just one final point here. Maybe just jump back to the homepage if you don't mind, Rupert. So let's talk about the future a minute. So we've talked about, well, as I say, AI is now. It's not in the future, it is now. But let's just jump open and have a look at the knowledge bot that you've pre-opened for us. So one of the core things about this now is that by having this sort of centralized key area that focuses on publishing, we can then point a knowledge agent, a Copilot knowledge agent to it so that we can start asking questions about specific definitive published content so we're getting relevant results. So as we can see here, Rupert has asked a question, what's our remote working policy? It's gone through and grabbed the documents from the published area and answered them in a sort of intuitive message format. So nowadays, I don't even have to go searching for something. I can just ask a question to my knowledge agent, knowing that it's only pointing at relevant results that are, appropriate in this context.
Okay, so that's a really key point, Ben. So if I've got a new remote working policy in draft in my HR workspace, which I'm going to come to in a second, that's not going to appear in this result because we've focused it only on the published information. Is that right?
Exactly that. Exactly that. So I think with that, you've kind of teed us up quite nicely there, Rupert. So let's start thinking about where do I go to do my day-to-day work? So I've come to my homepage and I'm seeing published stuff. I'm finding things easily, but where do I go to do my day-to-day work? So we're going to switch over to our Workspaces hub now, if that's okay.
Okay, so I see I've got a collection of hubs and each of these serves different purposes effectively, and that's why we have more than one. Is that right?
That's exactly it. So let's just have a look at our Workspaces hub a minute. So similarly to before, we have a consistent navigation. So if you just hover over our navigation there a minute, please, Rupert. So what we can see within here is that all of the different workspaces that make up our organization, typically aligned around business functions within high-level sort of parts of the organization, are clearly listed out and made available. So one of the common pieces of feedback that we get when people are using SharePoint the first time is it's quite difficult to just navigate your way around. So by bringing all of these workspaces into a clear and consistent navigation, it makes it really easy for people to find. The same thing goes to what we just said about search. So now that I've brought all of my workspaces together, if I regularly work across a few different workspaces, I can search for that document, knowing that it's in the context of the drafts and the collaboration and the filing that I do, but perhaps separate from the published intranet content.
Now, so I do have a question, Ben. So I, in my role, might not have access to all of these areas. Do I still see these links and click on them and get a nasty message, or how does that pan out?
Yeah, so typical consultant response there, Rupert, I would say it depends on what the need is. So often what you would see is that heading such as operations would be completely hidden away unless you were in one of those roles, and that would be done based on targeting the audience of those users based on who's in those sites. Whereas other functions might be a bit more open and so people can see them a bit more freely. The same thing goes for working groups, which ultimately is just a different type of workspace that doesn't quite align to a particular department function. And again, you would make that available based on if you're a member of it or not.
And I guess the other side of it is I see a lot of initial SharePoint configurations where it's just purely a list of each of the departments in the business and kind of reflecting on a one-to-one. But what you've done here by the looks of it is actually looked at what do people do in the organization rather than how are they structured. Is that
yeah, yeah, exactly. So there are some spaces here that are aligned directly to a business function, but then there are also some other spaces that might be aligned more to an activity. So something like,
Okay.
one of the things that we see is payroll, which might sit between HR and finance, so it warrants having a separate space. But again, within sales and marketing, we might have a space for bids and prospects. In projects, we might have a space for innovation and development. So we're creating spaces aligned and making sure the right people have got access to them, but all clearly visualized on the navigation so people can find their way around.
Perfect.
So with that, let's go and have a look inside a workspace. So we're going to go to our HR workspace, I think, which is always a pretty standard example. So a few things we're seeing here. First thing, again, if you're familiar with SharePoint, this is quite different to the out-of-the-box Teams site experience, which we don't find particularly useful or optimal. We find this a much more sort of intuitive experience to work with. On the right-hand side, just very quickly, we're going to call this out, which is that we've created this place to share information inside the HR team that standardizes the way that we do things. So it's kind of like an internal knowledge base for HR with a nice navigation experience on that right-hand side that breaks our pages down into high-level categories that we can go and switch through. So within our workspace, we have that kind of knowledge base for our internal use. But then the next fairly key thing that we're going to introduce is we've got two key document libraries. We talked about this idea of a document library being a container for documents. We have our working documents, which is basically our day-to-day collaboration space. And then we have our records area, which is going to be organized by employee, storing all of their contracts and key documents. We'll come to that in a minute. Let's have a look at the working documents area first.
Okay.
So I think the first thing to say about this, so again, just introducing those concepts really, we've talked about publishing and now we're going to talk about collaboration and filing. So this is very much focused on collaboration. This space is messy, right? And that's okay. It's okay to have a slightly messy space because it's organized around the activities that we do, and it's a space where we're in and out of every day. I know how to get to stuff because I'm in this folder every day. I don't need to tag everything and put metadata on here because I know how to get to it. I'm using it all the time. There's another really critical point that we're going to introduce here, which is this space is connected to Microsoft Teams. And this is something people don't always realize, that Teams and SharePoint, they are very, very tightly related. So we're going to jump over to Microsoft Teams now, Rupert. And we can see in our HR Microsoft team that we have some channels that align to the folders that we've got in our structure that we just showed over there. So we're basically looking at the same space, but through a different window. So let's look at that recruitment scenario. As I said, this is very much about activity. I think the first thing, Rupert, do you mind just going to the conversation tab, please?
Sure.
So the first thing is we are going to talk about things. We're going to collaborate with our colleagues using chats. Okay, so we're using chats in the context of our teams as opposed to just generic Teams chats, which are quite messy. We have a question that's been raised about this new CV. Someone's replied, and we're going to reply back to that and think about what we're going to do next and collaborate around that document. Okay, so this is very much activity based. Again, let's go back to the Files tab a second and kind of bring this home. So, sorry, Rupert, yeah, jump back, please.
Oh, this Files tab. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, the Files tab, yeah. So we go inside our recruitment folder. We've got Bob S. We look inside that. We've got his CV that we can go and work on. Let's jump back to the HR SharePoint site then, please. So we're going to go inside our recruitment subfolder there. We can see that Bob S folder. We'll go inside that. So again, we can see that document. It's the same space, but through a different window. We've brought them together instead of creating confusion by having Teams over here and SharePoint sites over here, okay? So wonderful, we've collaborated, we've done things like sharing, we've got documents. The next step is, okay, well, we're going to bring on Bob S, we're going to employ them. Let's start looking at our employee records area. Good. So what we're looking at now is a much more organized space. It's organized by our employees. And actually what we can see is we've got some additional things on here. Although it looks like a set of folders, it's actually got metadata on it. It's got the employment status. It's got what stage they are in their journey. It's got their start date. And what we're using to support this is a concept called document sets. Basically, document sets are packs of documents organized like a folder, but where you can apply metadata on them ultimately to make it easier to find, right? So we are in a filing scenario, and the key thing that we need to think about is at some point in the future, maybe a year down the line, I might want to find someone's contract quickly and easily. And this is where the metadata is going to help us do this. Okay. So let's go and create a new folder, shall we? A new document set for Bob.
Okay, so Bob S. He can start tomorrow. I don't think I need to put all of this in, do I? But let's give him his full name, Bob Smith. And well, there he is. He's appeared. So let's dive into that. Right, it's a bit empty at the moment.
Yep, don't worry. So this is going to get populated automatically in a second. So what we're going to see pop up fairly quickly is a standardized folder structure that has been tied to the document set. So we know that every document set is going to look the same. Maybe just hit refresh there, because normally that kicks in. It's because we're doing a live demo now, Rupert. That's why it's taking a few minutes. So maybe let's just have a look at another one very quickly.
There we go.
Yeah, okay, all right, there we are. Just one more and that'll do the job, I think.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. So so what we're going to do now, so we've got our standard folder structure set up within our document set. We're going to go and create a contract for Bob. So could you go into the employment job details folder?
And actually, this solves that problem which you see so often, where people have a sort of a standard structure, and then the first time you create something, someone has to go and recreate that standard structure every time. So by automating that, you're driving that consistency from the off.
Or they're copying it from a template, etc.
Okay.
So we're going to create this new contract, and we've actually pre-set up a standard template which we've linked into our library structure here. Give that a second to load. We'll just rename that. Don't worry, we're not going to make you sit through us while we fill out all of these details.
There we go. So
marvelous. Good. Okay, so let's just jump back to our library a minute.
Okay. Oh, there it is. It's already in there.
Good stuff. So we can see that the document has appeared, and there's one fairly interesting thing I want to just tie in. So what we have done, because this is a template that we've loaded, we've tied the document type into the actual template itself. We've also inherited the employment status and the legal name from the document set. So the key thing around this, people think, oh, metadata, it's lots of overhead, I've got to go and tag things. No one has actually had to tag anything on this document so far. All they've done is just put it in a standard structure and choose the type, and all of the tagging has taken place automatically without them having to do anything.
So Ben, why do we? For you.
Yeah,
that template, that's only going to appear here in the employee records. It's not going to appear anywhere else. Is that right?
No, that is correct. So there is an alternative approach that we can also use, which is very powerful, called organizational assets, where you publish a centralized list of templates, again, being able to tag them with the appropriate document type, and then you can reuse them anywhere. They basically appear within Office, and then you can go and save them anywhere. Yeah.
Like your company PowerPoint template, which everyone should use. And then when you want to update it for next year, I guess you just update it in one place, right? And then every new presentation everyone's on the same version. Is that right?
That's exactly it. Okay. So just this final point then. So again, why do we care about the metadata? So what that we have tagged this with contract? Let's think about one of the very quick wins that we can do. So if you jump back to the employee records top library there, please. So as we know, this is a folder structure organized with subfolders. But let's say you're that person that for an audit reason needs to go and review all of the current contracts for all of the current employees. What we can do is change our view to one that we've set up earlier called current employment contracts. And suddenly what we have done is flatten the folder structure and pull out all of the documents that are tagged as contract. So very quickly, I've got that bird's eye view of one particular type of document within that entire structure. I could have a separate one for identity documents, which we have. We could have one for letters, etc., etc. But what this does is make it very easy to benefit from the fact that that document has been tagged as a contract. So I can get that bird's eye view and show me all upcoming contracts for review, for example. We see this a lot in supplier management, where you might need to have a review of all upcoming contracts that might be approaching a renewal date, and you want to have a filter across your library to see that, for example.
Okay, Ben. So conscious of time, moving on, what's next? And
so yeah, one last little point about this, which is this point about the requirement to retain certain documents for a period of time. So do you mind just ticking on that contract that we've created? And if you just jump into the details pane a minute, please, Rupert, and then scroll down to the bottom or near the bottom.
Okay, I'm just having a little think. Just having a big think.
Yeah, maybe a slightly longer thing. Again, it's a live demo.
There we go.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, let's just scroll that down to the bottom, please. So yeah, so we can see here we have an option to apply a label. So we have defined something called a retention label that allows you to specify that a document should be retained for a given period of time. It cannot be deleted before that time, but then afterwards it can be configured to say, okay, once the 7 years is reached, automatically delete this document. Yeah.
So you don't have to have that, right? It doesn't have
no, not okay. No, exactly. But it's about creating these different rules to ensure that you keep your documents for the right period of time, but then also you dispose of them when it is relevant to do so. So yeah, so we applied that retention label to our documents to keep them. So I think we're done with the workspace hub. I think what we're going to do now is we don't have a huge amount of time left because we want to save the time for questions. So we're just going to jump into the projects hub quickly.
Okay, so hubs, projects, yep.
Okay, so very similar. But what we're doing in this case is organizing around a list of available projects. So what we'll often see is, you know, projects might start from a bid or a tender that you have to submit. They might turn into a project. And what we've got here effectively is a list of all of the projects that we're running, and each project will have a code and a standard workspace spun up. So I could create a new project. I'm not going to do that here. And then I can see all of my existing ones and click into those workspaces. Do you want to just click into that first one? So again, we have a slightly different standard template here. We've still got the concept of working documents and records. It's still linked to Microsoft Teams, as we talked about earlier. But in this case, we've got a couple of additional things. We have some lists. We've got issues, risk registers, other types of things. And, you know, this has all been templated into our projects template. So very quickly and easily, I can spin up a template. I've got a pre-configured issue list that I can start managing, you know, a risk register, those RAID log type activities.
Perfect. So we're driving consistency. That's the whole thing in automation through this. So PMO team, project managers, whoever you might be, you don't have to worry about SharePoint so much. It's like, let's get the data in, let's start going this project. Okay, so that's projects, Ben. I appreciate that. That was a brief,
exactly. A very brief overview.
But it's useful. Yeah.
Again, you know, we're in projects. We've got a shared space. The last one we're going to touch on very briefly is committees. Very similar concept, a different hub. And again, we're going to have a look into our finance and audit committee, if you don't mind, Rupert. So we've got a list of all of our different committees that we are accessing. We'll go into the finance and audit committee. So the key thing about this when it comes to committees is that typically committees might have a lot of external, maybe non-executive directors that don't necessarily have licenses. We need to share things with them easily. So in the behavior of a committee is it's not really collaborative. You're publishing documents for committee members to review. And we want that process to be really easy. So if you go into the committee meetings area,
got you.
We've just created a simple folder structure here. And then if you go into that subfolder here, we basically have a folder per committee meeting. And the key point that we just want to highlight is by organizing this way, we can very easily share those documents to those external people using the native sharing capability. So we're going to go share, maybe put,
type my name. Oh, that's not how I spell my name. There you go. Okay.
Okay.
So
yeah,
I'm getting
we're going
a
to
warning
share
here.
it.
Yeah.
That's it. You're sharing outside your organization. Our default settings have been set to read only because that's typically the behavior of a committee. We're going to give them read access as opposed to a collaborative space. And they will be able to sign in very, very seamlessly to that experience without going through lots of hoops in order to get to those documents. So I think that probably wraps it up in terms of demos for the moment, unless there's any other questions that you want to raise, Rupert, before we move on.
No, I think that's good.
Up.
Let me do a little summary. We can take any questions. If we do need to come back to the demo to answer those questions, obviously we've got that available to us. So quick summary of what we've just seen there today is you talked about the three types of content, collaboration and filing, particularly in that HR scenario, but then the publishing in terms of that broader internet place, so the kind of content where I'm confident I can make decisions based on it. Then you talked about hubs, and so how we group that information together by purpose. So we had a hub for intranet, a Teams workspaces hub, a projects hub, a committees hub. So grouping those sites by that purpose, giving that, as you said, that common navigation within the hub, but also that search as well, which only searches that hub. So that's particularly useful. And then the takeaway about planning workspaces. So think about your document management, those internal processes we saw in HR. So keeping those processes, which are only related to a small audience, focusful audience. The rest of the business doesn't need to see that in the organization. And then you talked about the purpose of documents and how we separated filing to working documents. So that great example you showed of HR contracts and the ability both. We didn't actually have to add the metadata ourselves because the way we set it was quite smart in terms of we already knew the metadata, so the document could be almost classified, without effort. I think the big fear is how do I, how do I get my people to classify my data? Well, actually, if we can get 90% of the way there to achieve that value, then maybe the last 10% is a little bit more achievable.
Yeah, and I might just add, actually, we are seeing now the AI capabilities coming into SharePoint are making that ability to auto-classify documents much more effective. It's really come on leaps and bounds.
Yeah, I think that's like literally the last week that has happened, and we're in preview, so we'll be looking forward to showing more of that in the future. So there was a load of slides in here which we didn't show on purpose because we wanted to keep it to the demo. So if you do want the slides, I think Matt will come back to the end and tell you how you can get hold of those, so you can get those as a download. But so what does this mean? So today we talked a bit about art of the possible, and if this is resonating with you, thinking, well, actually, yeah, this could be something that could be useful to us. There's a few things you need to do, and the first thing is define your vision. So what are you trying to achieve? How does this fit into the business? And you don't have to do a huge amount of homework. You've probably got some ideas already. And then take that vision thinking, well, how do I turn that into a strategy? And that's what we do with the Explore phase workshops that we've done already for a number of Ramsack clients. And we do these workshops. They're about half a day each. But in the first one, it's all about vision, fact finding, and trying to bring everyone up to the same level of understanding and common goal. And then the second workshop's all about strategy. So given everything that we want to achieve, or what do we want to achieve right now? What does that mean? What's the most important thing that we need to address? Is it maybe document management? Is it moving off a file server? So this is how we look to move forward if you're looking for some help. And I think, Matt, maybe now's the time I can bring you back into the meeting.
Yeah, thanks very much, Rupert. And Ben, what a fantastic presentation there. I think in a short time, you've shown so much of the capabilities and powers of SharePoint when it is done right. That was brilliant. Thank you. Rupert, you just mentioned how you've done this with this journey in the workshops, this approach with various clients, and a couple of recent projects. You've done a sort of 200 user organization that was going into SharePoint for the first time from a file server that started with these workshops, and then equally a 50 user nonprofit charity that were already in SharePoint but in a very basic fashion, where you've now delivered a full intranet and some of the stuff we've seen today. So it's a tried and tested approach. But again, thank you very much for that presentation. I'm sure that's given people lots of inspiration and ideas for what they could achieve in SharePoint. Thank you, firstly, Rupert and Ben, for an excellent presentation and demo as well, and for answering those questions. It's great to have your years of experience and knowledge helping us out with this one. Tats, thank you for fielding all those questions. As I say, we'll pick up on some of those other ones. Ben was desperate to talk about the templates as well, but I've had to cut us off, unfortunately. So we will follow up on those. I hope everyone watching you found this useful. And if you're interested in finding out more about how Ramsack and Information EXP can help you with SharePoint, please just reply to that email, or if you're already a Ramsack customer, then please speak to your relationship manager and we'd be delighted to work with you. Thanks very much, everyone, for all your time today. Have a fantastic afternoon, and I hope we'll see you at some future events.